Joni Ernst on apparently bogus Second Amendment issues. That wasn't planned at all. I just saw that commercial this morning and I was so puzzled by it. I just wanted to talk about it. And I had a guest that was scheduled that was unable to make connections. What I did have planned, though, this morning for this hour is a discussion on some of these very same issues. The importance of the Second Amendment and our right to keep and bear arms and our right to preserve our freedoms and to protect ourselves using our Second Amendment rights. I've assembled a panel from here in the state of Iowa and all over the country talking about this. Gentlemen, I'm just going to get right to it. I didn't think we'd be talking about this issue in this campaign for any reason because I thought it was pretty much expended with the decline and fall of President Obama. He's, as I said during the last hour, sold more guns and ammo than any arms merchant at any time. But I've assembled a panel brought to you in part by the IFC, the Iowa Firearms Coalition. And Barry Snell, you are their communications director, welcoming you here in the studio. Welcome aboard.
Thank you. Thank you for having us.
And I remember you from a previous conversation. You did some kind of a think piece for the, you were still in college and you were a journalism guy and you did a think piece for the Iowa State something or other?
The Iowa State Daily, yes.
Yeah.
I was the assistant opinion editor at the time.
And they weren't too thrilled with you up there.
Well, I wouldn't say that
Well, I shouldn't say you're just not politically correct. That's just the shortcut
yeah,
to that.
but for the most part,
Right.
I think that I had pretty positive reaction to it.
Yeah, from normal people.
Yeah, right.
So they're not, let's also be joined on our Newsmaker line by Jeff Burkett. He's the president of that organization. Welcome aboard, Jeff.
Thanks, Jan. I appreciate you having us on.
We have so many different issues to talk about, and we'll get the listeners involved in this too because they're really innovated about it, and energized rather is the right word. And also joining us from the Buckeye Firearms Association from Cincinnati, Sean Maloney. Welcome aboard, Sean.
Thanks for having me this morning. I appreciate it.
You bet. And Timothy Knight, you are from Durango, Colorado. You're the founder of the Colorado Recall. Now, help me recall the recall, okay? Because I remember you guys got really incensed because a couple of your legislators decided to get squishy on the Second Amendment, and you guys got mad about it.
Yeah, thank you for having me. We got very incensed. They cut off our ability to testify. They told us they actually went on national TV and told us they didn't care what their constituents thought. And we made 137 years of state history. Colorado has a recall provision, which has never happened before, but we did it twice in one day. And we fought two big political machines and Michael Bloomberg money, and we're outspent 22-1, but the citizens won. And it was an epic 9-month journey, but it was pretty neat.
Okay, what was the issue?
That was background checks. It was magazine capacity, and that was the issue that kind of sparked it, but the real issue was that they chose not to listen to us. They shut down testimony, they changed testimony rules, and said out loud that they didn't care what their constituents thought. And that's really what got people incensed.
Yeah, that kind of imperious behavior annoys anybody, especially those people who are paying the bills.
Yes, legislative tyranny is something that needs to be pushed back. The legislators need to remember who they do work for and who they represent, and in Colorado they forgot.
Well, we don't have that mechanism. We have petition. We can petition our political class, but we can't. We don't have no referendum. We don't have initiative, and we don't have recall here in the state of Iowa.
Well, in essence, you do. November 4th.
That is, we can ratify, we can say yes, we can non-retain.
Exactly.
Iowans have been known to do that from time to time.
Yeah, that's their right. And you know what? That's really why we're here, is to remind people to vote. It's so incredibly important.
Well, so, Jeff, you and Barry, you're the locals here. Why are you guys concerned? And why are Democrats raising these issues at the last moment when it never works for them? What do you think is going on?
Well, I think at the last moment, what you're seeing is a last-ditch effort to get some more fear-mongering out there on the Second Amendment issue. As you heard in the Colorado environment, it wasn't very popular when they decided to shut people down and not take public opinion. And the reason for that is because the facts are heavily in our favor. They don't want to talk in terms of reason or even concern to the Constitution, the framework in which our country was founded upon. these people have an agenda, and they want to move forward with it very decisively and without public opinion.
Well, I'm taking their side for just a second. We just want to protect people from bad people and innocent people, maybe victims of domestic abuse or felons who shouldn't have guns in the first place. We just want to protect people. So what's wrong with that?
Well, we want to protect people, and the way we protect people is by their guaranteed constitutional right to keep and bear firearms. And really what they've done here is just to magnify the issue. You're talking a little bit about the previous hour where you had a sheriff raise a concern on a NICS check, which, by the way, that NICS check came back positive or in favor of the individual as not having their not as being mentally stable, not having been adjudicated mentally unstable to own a firearm. So you have a person, they'd read something somewhere, and we have these, we have people in political offices, including the county sheriff's seat on up to at this point the President of the United States, who really want to put their personal opinion on whether or not individuals should have a constitutional right to protect themselves. You hear a couple stories out there where some tragedies happen, and it's certainly horrible. When you have a death with a firearm, but these same people, you have people that are killed. More people are killed by blunt objects and objects that aren't firearms than with AR-15s that they're trying to demonize in the court of public opinion. So it's all about getting the facts out there and getting the groundwork in place to get that communication out there, because we really have a biased media reporting system that fails. I mean, you rarely see on the news, conversely, the side of where somebody defends themselves in their home from an attacker.
Let me just play it in case people are just joining us here. This is a commercial I played during last hour. It's 30 seconds, and it's an attack ad against a person who's running for the Senate here in the state of Iowa, Joni Ernst. She's running against Bruce Braley. This is a Senate seat that it's rarely opened, so it's Senator Tom Harkin has decided to retire, and that's unleashed a race that has generated literally millions and millions and millions of dollars coming into the state, because the balance of power at the U.S. Senate is up for grabs, and just about every special interest group that has an opinion wants in on this decision-making process, and the gun control people serve this up.
I've been around guns all my life. It's dangerous when a convicted felon or domestic abuser gets their hands on one. But Joni Ernst won't vote to close the loophole that lets some dangerous people still get guns. I know Joni Ernst gets a lot of money from folks in Washington that support this loophole. But she's wrong to put Washington money before Iowa common sense.
Americans for Responsible Solutions PAC approve the content of this message.
All right, so here's the deal. You guys are the experts. I'm just the talking head here that's just pondering this stuff. You guys know this stuff inside and out. If you were sitting here at the microphone, in fact, you are right now, respond to what you just heard. Take it apart any way you want. This is Mr. Maloney from the Buckeye Firearms Association in Ohio.
Background checks are already in place, and they have been in place, NICS checks, since 1998. The checks are already done to look for criminal records, to find out who is already under a firearms liability and who shouldn't have a firearm. The big loophole is in the mental health system, where because of HIPAA laws, and the only way that a person can be limited in their constitutional rights for a mental illness is you have to be adjudicated mentally deficient, and that's by taking it to a court. So your doctor can know you're nuts, your parents can, but until a judge says it, you're not considered that way. And then after the decision is made, the reporting has to be made to the federal NICS system. So felons can't purchase firearms. They get them other ways. Background checks aren't going to stop a bad guy from getting a firearm. So the protections are already in place, and they have been for years.
This is off the subject, sort of, but you just stimulated something. I got another piece of email this morning from another organization that says the way to fix all of this is the guns that ID only the person who is who I can't remember the name, the jargon they're using, but
Smart guy.
smart guns. And that's the way to fix all of this gun violence. Everybody has to have a smart gun, only fire for the one person who it's coded for.
First of all, the technology doesn't exist. And if it did, I can't imagine what each firearm would cost if it did. And there's always ways around things. But again, that doesn't address the problem. The problem is the human condition. Back to Cain versus Abel, there's good and evil. And you can't legislate or regulate the evil out of a person's soul and heart. And what it comes down to is personal responsibility for the law-abiding citizen. And I might add that the states that institute concealed carry, which now all 50 have them, violent crime goes down at a minimum of 20% as soon as the legislation is passed.
I find the chief of police up in Illinois just said, hey, we want more concealed carries rather than less, because if the police department up there, if flat admitted, we cannot even scratch the surface of the crime problems in some of these neighborhoods. The smartest thing that you guys can do is go get yourself a gun. When the chief of police says that in an urban area like Chicago, that's an amazing insight, isn't it?
Isn't it refreshing that law enforcement understands and promotes the fact that, hey, you have our backs, American citizens, we can't do it alone? And they trust us. In fact, now that they can keep statistics on us, concealed
Right.
carry holders, the concealed carry holder in America is considered the safest, most law-abiding segment of society, bar none.
And if I can add, too, that's a common refrain that we're starting to hear from a lot of law enforcement officials across the country. We're hearing it come out of Detroit, Sheriff Clark in Minneapolis. This is becoming something that's part of the cultural norm.
What is
now.
the refrain now?
That the police will not be there when you have a problem, and that until they can arrive, whatever their response time is, 5-10 minutes, until they arrive, you're on your own.
A good guy with a gun.
Right.
Really, that's what
Okay.
we're looking at.
Okay, I need to take a short time out here. In my wildest dream, friends, I would not have imagined we'd be talking about Second Amendment issues this close to the midterm elections next week. Just from a political and analyst position, I know I'm an amateur at this, but why, oh, why would the political party that gets hammered every time they bring this up, why are they bringing it up? So I guess I shouldn't be complaining. I'm just stunned at the tone-deaf nature of politics every once in a while. A brief timeout. You're welcome to join us at 284-1040 or 800-469-4295 on News Radio 1040 WHO.
Small towns and family farms. Iowa's beat.
1 and go.
1040 WHO.
The big bad world, the big bad world. Who's afraid of the big bad world? Nobody loves a chicken. Who's afraid of the big bad world? The big bad world, the big bad world. Who's afraid of the big bad world? Get some guts and feel no fear.
My in-studio guest, the panel that we've assumed from not only here in Iowa, but around the country as well. Timothy Knight is from Durango, Colorado, and you're confused, sir. They named the county after the Dodge pickup truck. We were in a big argument about this. They can't do that. So he's one of the founders of the Colorado Recall, and they successfully showed a couple of their arrogant political class the front door. By the way, are they still engaged in politics? Or are they trying to
Yeah, they're
weasel
still
their
working
way?
around the edge, you bet. But they don't have an official title anymore.
I'll bet you haven't seen and heard of the last of these varmints.
We have not.
Okay. Also from Ohio, from the Buckeye Firearms Association, Sean Maloney is here, and he is a fierce advocate for the Second Amendment. Here's Bailiwick, and Jeff Burkett and Barry Snell with the Iowa Firearms Coalition here in the state. Jeff is on our Newsmaker line because I think, as I recall the story, he lost his license, and I can't remember why he was not able to drive, Jeff. Is just some irresponsible behavior on your part, I'm figuring.
Yeah, pretty much so. I slept in.
I'm just making that up. You shouldn't be harassing people who are carrying, now I think about it. The reason why I'm just shocked that this is even an issue is because you had the Democrat sheriff just uttering what he did in that campaign commercial I played a soundbite of a news story. Some kids had airsoft rifles at their house, took pictures of themselves, and posted on Facebook. These kids were kicked out of school for a couple weeks because they, quote, were making other children nervous. And here in Iowa, and you got the sheriff making that. We had Gabby Giffords in the state a couple of days ago talking about getting that some of these Second Amendment issues underway and getting gun control again, closing the loophole again. But you said it a few moments ago, Sean. This is a mental health issue in the Gabby Giffords case. You had a crazy person, and I just got a story this morning that went down the list of some of the mass shootings and some of the crazy people and some of the people who have shot other people at schools and other places, including in the Giffords case. Almost every single case, they were on some kind of psychotropic drugs, and they're blaming guns for what crazy people on drugs are doing.
You're absolutely right, and that's the way it's been for all of these mass shootings. And again, magazine capacity, types of firearms, mean black-looking firearms isn't the answer. Again, it's how do you take and you take care of that human condition. As a parent, we have the responsibility to make sure that we keep our children safe, and in some cases, keep everybody else safe from our children when that applies. And it's all been done before, and the purpose and the reason that I'm here specifically is because it'll pop up 3 days before election or 10 days before the election. Our rights are always under attack. It's our civil rights. You know, they're inalienable rights that we have, and I'm here just to remind people that you can do something, that our civil rights and our constitutional rights are borderless. What happens in Iowa affects me in Ohio, it affects Tim in Colorado, so it's so important that as part of our battle that we as law-abiding citizens and who believe in our civil rights and our forefathers and all the great things that have been handed down to us, that we continue to protect those. And how do you do that? You call your friends. At this point in time, I mean, do you even listen to your answering machine anymore from the robocalls and look at all the emails? Well, it's time to call your friends. I would rather listen to what you're telling me than to what a 30-second commercial is. So please get out and exercise that right.
Let's talk to some of the listeners who are joining us and who have questions about some of this. Tim, you're a legal firearm owner, but you're wondering what?
Well, I own guns, but I was just wondering if I had a handgun and I can sell it to somebody that's an abuser or a felon, and I don't have to do a background check on them or anything, but I mean, it's allowing a felon or an abuser to get a gun. And I don't see anything wrong with having to have a background check. You know, what's wrong with that?
Well, it's perfect, and what that is, Tim, is the universal background check. And the universal background check only works if a couple other provisions in. So certainly, number one, if you knowingly transfer a firearm to a felon or somebody mentally ill, then you're a felon also, so you're breaking the law.
Exactly.
So
but
then,
if I don't know.
So when you do the background check, so they push for a universal background check, and that means that if I want to sell a firearm to my neighbor or pass down a firearm to my son or my grandson or my daughter or my granddaughter, that they have to have background checks. Well, what people fail to realize, and the government admits that, is that how do they know that I just gave my firearm to my son or my daughter? Well, that's through registration. Throughout history, universal background checks equals universal registration and equals universal compensation. Look it up. It's everywhere in the world, and it's always the same way. So the only way it works, and they try to play on our emotions that we need this, but universal registration and the fact that it will only work if we register and report what we have to our government, that's the only way it works. And that's the problem that I have.
I think registering and is fine. I really do. I think it's, you know, if people have nothing to hide, why do they care if they register their guns?
It's the same constitutional right argument.
Same constitutional right just to say that if you have nothing to hide, there's not a problem saying, I own this gun.
Tim, can I interject this is nothing to do with the Second Amendment or guns, but your basic relationship that you want to have with you and I would consider our employees. That would be the people we hire to run and administer our government for us. And there's a story here in Iowa this week of a lady who lives up by Okoboji, I think. She, in her business, is a totally honorable business. And she just had the IRS come in and steal her bank account because she deposited money in chunks less than $10,000 or whatever, causing the IRS to say, we have the legal basis to take her money out of her bank account with no proof that she had ever done anything, that she was engaging in any criminal activity. She just met some template criteria that allowed them the power to use forfeiture laws to steal her money. That's why you don't trust government with anything, especially when it comes to issues of your rights, because there's not a government on the planet that has ever been able to color between the lines, ever.
The other two important points on this question is, one, gun registration historically always leads to confiscation, so that's a bad thing. But most importantly, it's ignorant and naive of us as a society to believe that, okay, the question posed was, if you don't have anything to hide as a law-abiding good citizen, what's your problem with registration? But the problem is,
or letting the government monitor your internet or your phone calls or read your mail.
Well, the bigger problem with that is criminals don't care. They're going to go and they're going to go steal the firearms and they're going to circumvent the process, and you're in the exact same boat that you're in now with unenforceable laws that don't do anything but hinder good law-abiding Americans.
Right.
So I know we can't stop it all, but we could stop some. You know, if I as a person had to register where I'm selling my guns, would be, I think, is a good thing.
Tim,
that's all I got to say.
All right, thank you, Tim. Appreciate it. Go ahead.
If I could actually say something to that.
Go ahead.
I kind of wish Tim was still on, but the idea of a universal background check is based on the premise that it applies to every single transfer of a firearm from one person to another. Now, the difference is guys like Tim, we're not worried about guys like Tim because obviously he's a law-abiding guy. He's got concerns. He wants to participate in civil society.
And
not
he wants
hurt
the
anybody.
society to be safe, and that's a noble goal.
Right, and he's not the problem. And all of us sitting here, we're not the problem. It's the people who will not obey the law that are the problem. Therefore, this whole talk of universal background checks is a fallacy because they're not actually universal. The background checks, the gun transfers that we want to know about are the illegal ones that are outside of the scope of the law.
Well, my shortcut on this, gentlemen, is this is the at-risk fallacy. And because some people are genuinely at risk for presenting a danger to the rest of us because they are criminals or crazy or fill in the blank, whatever irresponsible behavior or what character is like, because some people are genuinely like that, all of us have to be treated as if we are just like those guys.
Sure.
And that's, I need to take a short time out here for our farm markets, and we'll come back to the conversation. Folks, we have a panel of Second Amendment advocates, and we're not hiding that even a little bit. They're probably some of the best studied and well spoken and articulate people on this subject. If you've ever wondered about any of your gun rights or any limitations upon them, or you're welcome if you are a Second Amendment, the opposite of a Second Amendment advocate, and if you are in any gun control philosophy whatsoever, I'm not trying to shut anybody down here this morning, but we are trying to stimulate conversation. And if you have what you think may be the stopper argument of all times for advocating for limitations of our Second Amendment rights, I'd like to hear it. We're not just trying to have a one-sided conversation. We'll return in a moment right after our farm markets on News Radio 1040 WHO.
This is Tom Coates from
Wilson here with you. We're talking with Second Amendment advocates from the Iowa Firearms Coalition, Barry Snell and Jeff Burkett on our Newsmaker line. And we're talking about all the different ramifications of our rights, and we're all up for grabs all the time when there is an election cycle. And for some mysterious reason, the Democrats have decided to interject this in the last few minutes of mysteriously, they've done this. And Timothy Knight from Durango, Colorado, he's the founder of the Colorado Recalls, very successful one. They were able to recall some of the arrogant political class and show them their front door when they tampered or tried to tamper with Second Amendment rights. You wanted in the last segment to what we were talking about.
Oh, just to mention that the previous caller, Tim, had mentioned he was concerned about background checks and wanted to have one. In fact, there's nothing stopping him from doing a background check. He could go to a gun dealer and say, I would like to do a background, I would like to sell this, and pay that dealer for a background check. There's nothing stopping him, or anyone for that matter, being concerned about selling a firearm to someone else.
So really, so if I wanted to sell a gun to somebody, and as a private individual, and I'm concerned about this, and I don't know that individual, they just got cash, but I still want to be very careful. I can go to whom and ask for a background check?
Any person who holds a federal firearms license, which would be pawn shops, gun stores generally, gun stores for sure, and pawn shops generally. Yeah, they can do that.
Any place that sells firearms can do that, and are they obligated? Do you have to pay them money to do that?
Usually, you have to pay them a transaction fee. I don't know what the law in Iowa would be, but in Colorado, we have to pay a $10 transaction fee.
It's also common practice, Jan, for people to request to see a permit to carry or a permit to purchase, which signifies from the county that that person lives in that they have undergone the background check process. So if we want to, if I want to sell you a firearm, I could say, hey, Jan, I need to see a carry permit before I can do this.
Okay.
So that's one way to do that.
That eliminates the question mark right there.
Yes, sir.
All right. Thank you. This is Roger. Good morning. You're talking with our guests.
Yeah, hi.
Hi there.
Hey, I was wondering on the Second Amendment, why have we ignored the first half of the Second Amendment? And I guess when we ignore the first half of the Second Amendment, doesn't it weaken the second half? And did the founders get it wrong about having a well-regulated militia?
If you listen, or if you take some time to read the opinion in Heller versus Washington, D.C., when the Supreme Court ruled on this issue for the first time in over 100 years, they specifically laid out a well-regulated militia being necessary to security of a free state. So that is in there. And that's an important point. I always tell people my Second Amendment rights isn't about duck hunting, although I love duck hunting. It's not even really specifically about personal
your
protection.
beard is kind of a pathetic example.
Yeah, exactly.
You're not going to be able to be on the Duck
Dynasty. I'm tried. Ducks Dynasty. That won't get in.
Yeah, just 3-day growth ain't going to cut it.
Not going to cut it. And so, but at the same time, it's about protection from our tyranny, from our own government and on down. If you look through history and you see what happened in China, Russia, and what happened in Nazi Germany, it all started with
what they
gun
tried to
confiscations.
do at Concord and Lexington, the British troops were targeting the gun magazines.
Right. The shot heard around the world was started because they wanted someone's firearms.
Absolutely.
The thing, one thing I want to interject there, the thing that people forget about the Second Amendment is the Second Amendment is not a restriction on the citizens of the United States. It's a restriction on our government. And that's where the perspective commonly gets misplaced, is people want to look at it and say, how can we take this and restrict what law-abiding citizens can do when it's really a restriction on what the government is allowed to do to law-abiding citizens for their right to bear arms.
Jeff, are you an attorney? Are you a lawyer?
I am not.
Well, you can't be expected then to understand the legal niceties of the Second Amendment. And I'm just going to play the soundbite of an attorney who is running for Senate here in the state of Iowa, who probably understands this way better than you. This is Bruce Braley.
I'm a strong supporter of the Second Amendment, but the Second Amendment is like the other amendments in the Bill of Rights. It's a balance between individual liberty and the public good. And that's why it starts out in order to have a well-regulated militia. So we want to make sure that we're providing that proper balance. And I think that there's a big difference between where we stand on these issues. Senator Ernst doesn't think you should even have to go through a permit process to carry a concealed weapon, and that you should be able to take it into a bar or a church, and I think that's wrong.
All right, so that's an attorney that says that it's up to Congress to well-regulate the militia. And that there is a balance between the public good and the rights, and it's his job to seek that balance. And that's what the Bill of Rights was all about, to seek a balance.
Right. We hear all the time that the Second Amendment states well-regulated, therefore we can regulate. We hear that all the time.
Yes.
And the caller asked if perhaps the meaning has changed or the founders got it wrong.
Meaning has changed.
Yes, the meaning of the language has changed, but not the original meaning of the intent.
Right.
And the language, well-regulated militia at the time, let's start with well-regulated. That simply meant people who were good with their guns.
They practiced.
They practiced, yes. They meant, once a month or once a week, and they would go out and they'd shoot at targets, and they'd do their militia muster.
Their drills.
Yes, sir. Small unit tactics, things like that. The militia part.
That's why they called them the regulars.
Right. So the militia part that we always hear about, is if you go back to 18th century understanding of that meant all of us. All able-bodied males, and now we understand that to include females too. So everybody is the militia. The idea being
between
that
18 and 45, according to the Iowa Constitution,
Right.
I think. I need to take a short time out here.
Sure.
Folks, we're going to stay at this for a little while. I can't think of a better panel of experts to pick their brains. And if you've had any questions about this at any level, you don't have to agree. 284-1040 or 800-469-4295 in a moment.
The threat is rising.
My in-studio guests, if they could stay with us into the next segment after the news at the top of the hour. Our phone lines are full. A lot of people want to take advantage of their expertise. If you have questions about any of your Second Amendment rights, we are at the right place. Two representatives from the Iowa Firearms Coalition, one from the Buckeye Firearm Association in Ohio, another from Colorado here, and I won't go through their names this time in the interest of time, but I'll go right to the phone lines. This is Leonard. Good morning, Leonard.
Hello.
Hi.
Good morning. Yeah, I just wanted to weigh in on this. I'm a convicted felon, and I do have a concealed carry permit. The felon that I was convicted 25 years ago on a forgery charge on a $50 check.
Right.
And so I was pooled in with all the murderers and rapists and all this other stuff.
Did you have to apply for
I had to apply for
from the governor?
Governor's pardon,
Okay.
which I was denied. So I went to my computer and I printed one off and I forged that. No, I'm just kidding. Just kidding. But anyway, that's all I wanted to say.
Thanks a lot, Leonard.
It makes my job a lot easier. Because now when I go into banks, I do withdrawals at gunpoint, so it's only half illegal.
Thank you, Leonard.
All righty. Bye.
And just to weigh in on Leonard a little bit, there are provisions because some people are convicted of felonies, bad decisions,
Right.
bounced checks that had nothing to do with violence.
Right.
But if you get a certain sentence, you're under a firearms disability in America. Well, after 9/11, it used to be the federal government, the district attorneys or prosecuting attorneys for the federal governments would take care of that and grant restoration of rights. Well, they left it up to the states now. So you can go to the county that you live in and apply for restoration of firearms rights. Tell them, hey, I'm a good guy.
Right.
This happened then. And then get your constitutional civil rights back. It doesn't happen automatically. So there are provisions for that. And he was joking, but he brought up a good point. There are some people and he would be caught for writing a bad check on a NICS check, and he wouldn't be able to purchase a firearm. So that provision is available to somebody to get a restoration of civil rights if it applies.
Well, directly to that point and what he was just saying, Brad, you have a really good question about that, the nature of the felonies. Good morning, Brad. What would you like? What's the question, Brad? Go ahead.
Okay. I got an OWI over 20 years ago,
Right.
and I was wondering why you wouldn't be able.
Was it a felony?
Yeah.
Okay. Because it's a felony. That's
Yeah,
why.
If it's a felony and you were sentenced to more than 1 year and a day, so you're sentenced to 1 year and a day.
Is that universal or
yeah,
here in Iowa?
No, that's federal. That's federal
Okay,
provision.
all right.
That's there's very fine points. There's only a certain number of things. But if you were sentenced to 1 year and a day, then you're under a disability, and then you apply for a release of that disability or a restoration of rights. So
From the local jurisdiction.
from the firearms disability from your county, correct?
All right, so helping Brad here. Brad, you were sentenced to how long? How long did you?
I wasn't.
So you were a felon, OWI felony, never sentenced, never put in jail?
Nope.
But he's lost because it's listed as a felony. He cannot get a Second Amendment right.
And that's the
how does he get
that's the
help?
federal NICS check system. It's
Right.
popping up. They don't know why he has a felony. He can do a NICS appeal, and the Nix appeal and prove, usually through that he's not under disability, and it's just the easiest to have an attorney do that. But the BATF's webpage provides some guidance for that.
Which webpage again?
Bureau of Alcohol, Tobacco, and Firearms webpage, BATF.
Okay.
And they talk about Nix appeals, and they talk about different ways that he can prove that it's not under
Okay.
felony.
So, Brad, you understand that?
Yep.
Okay. Good luck.
All right, thank you.
Thank you. So you're not permanently locked out. There's always an appeals process.
That's correct.
There's some things you can do that permanently should remove your Second Amendment rights.
Minor misdemeanor, domestic violence, you can never own a firearm.
Ever?
Ever.
Domestic violence?
Minor misdemeanor domestic violence. If you had a felony domestic violence, well, yeah, I can get my rights back. But if it's a minor misdemeanor, you cannot. And that's just been litigated again at the United States Supreme Court. Unanimously, our Supreme Court said you're correct. If you have a minor misdemeanor.
Small towns and family farms. Iowa's beating heart.
And not necessarily those of News Radio 1040 WHO.
There are so many things to talk about in this last segment we have together with the Second Amendment advocates from not only here in the state of Iowa, but from Ohio and in Colorado. For the last 10 minutes, I've just been picking the brains of these gentlemen, and I wish we could duplicate everything that I just heard, and I'm going to try as best I can because it was absolutely fascinating. And Timothy Knight is the founder of that Colorado recall. And can you feel comfortable talking to us about what you just said, a little bit about how neither party is particularly happy with you about what happened? Or I don't want you to burn any more bridges. But
No,
I don't think you really care at this
No, I
point.
don't. We were upsetting the political process because we have the recall provision, and neither party, of course, we were, and at that time, going up against two Democrats who had infringed on our rights. But the Republican Party didn't want us to do it either because it's a provision that was in our Constitution, but it hadn't been used or been effective for 137 years. So what we were, in essence, doing as citizens, we're pushing up against something that there's no way that can happen. You'll never do it. And it's very hard to do, but neither side wanted us to do it. Now, the Republicans were going to eventually gain, if those people recall, 2 seats back in the Senate.
Right.
They did eventually get back on the horse, but it took them a good 6 months to...
Well, plus it also, you messed up a lot of cozy, crony, capitalist, government-related contracts that the people had worked hard. If you buy a politician, they want to stay bought, and you're going to get rid of my purchase?
Yeah. When you look at the money we ran against, it was Bloomberg money, but it was casino money, it was big pharma money, because those kind of things...
own everything.
Yeah, well, they own things, but in the reality, the citizens didn't care about that. They wanted their rights, so the process was going to move forward,
right?
Which was the amazing thing that it happened.
And then all of a sudden, you find out what politics is really all about. It's the distribution of other people's money, and issues they just use issues as a shell game to bring the rubes into the process to get a job. After that happens, it's, hey, we don't want to hear from you people again. We got the job.
Yeah, well, we reminded them. We had the opportunity to remind them that in fact was not going to be the case.
We should also add another part of this conversation. Sean Maloney, can you repeat some of the stuff that you said? Because some of the things that you told us during the break, I'd never heard before. Because of the Lautenberg Amendment, a lot of people's rights are at risk at any time because of some of the laws that have been written and some gross unfairness is going on right now.
The Lautenberg Amendment, for example, was a part of an appropriations bill that was slipped in. And that's why it's so important that everybody listening exercise your right to vote. Make sure
you don't have to pass it to find out what's in it.
Exactly. So you can make a decision and make sure that our representative form of government is making the proper decisions.
All right. So what is the provision? What are the little time bombs were left behind in this piece of thing?
The little time bomb that was left behind here, if you are convicted of a minor misdemeanor domestic violence, meaning that you and I are brothers, and we're yelling at each other and the police come up, they're getting sick of trying to settle our arguments for us, so I get charged with a minor misdemeanor, and it's my relative, so it's domestic violence. If I plead guilty to that, or I'm found guilty of the minor misdemeanor domestic violence charge, I can never own firearms, ever. And what's even more disturbing about that, and which has been upheld by the courts, is it applies to anybody who has ever been convicted of a minor misdemeanor domestic violence, meaning that if I pled to something or was found guilty or didn't fight something that happened 10 years before that even became law, I still can't own firearms.
It's retroactive.
It's retroactive.
That's not constitutional on its face.
Well, you and I and everybody in this room thinks that, and a lot of other people, but the United States Supreme Court and other
But the
courts in America...
Constitution flatly says you can't have, you cannot...
As
you
post
cannot,
facto law.
Yeah, you can't pass a law like that.
For probably government safety and whatever reasons there are, that's the reality of what we're living on. And if you're familiar with courtrooms and if you're an attorney, all the attorneys will tell you now, there's specific sheets that are there that says, hey, if you plead the unintended consequences, the loss of firearms rights, the judges want you to sign that you understand that, to make sure that if you have a minor misdemeanor domestic violence and that affects your gun rights, that you're acknowledging to the court that, yes, I know this is happening.
If it's a minor misdemeanor, why is it even going to court?
Well, it's a ticket, and if you're going to plead guilty to it or not guilty to it, it has to be adjudicated. And so you have to be in court for that.
So this elevates our necessity to understand our rights and some of the twisted elements of recent applications of I'm not going to say well-intended law. I'm just going to say whatever the laws are, that we have to understand what our rights are in order to defend them, and you've got to be way smarter than we have been.
Well, and if you think about it, if any of us knew that this politician was going to slip that in, no matter what side of the issue on, just based on our core civil rights, would we have voted for that person? Of course not. I don't think anybody would.
And that's why that's why theoretically they're not supposed to put. You said that was an appropriations bill. Theoretically, that's not even legal to put a non-germane issue into an appropriation bill. It was probably it's illegal on its face.
Probably.
At least it would be in Iowa, I think. They're not supposed to just slop stuff on to an appropriation bill that have legal and administrative effects outside the purview of that appropriations bill.
And we would never get past the common sense provisions. What's going on?
This really highlights not only, as you said, Jan, the burden of us to know what our rights are is much higher because of little things like this.
Well, are there issues here? For instance, you guys are here to talk about the issue in the state. What is going on here in the state of Iowa that necessitates your attention?
Yeah. Okay. So basically the thing that we have is we have pretty broad-based bipartisan support for most of the bills that we sponsor, that we help, write in the state legislature here in Des Moines. That includes Republicans and Democrats. And our legislation typically just flies through the House because of our good relationships there and the common sense nature of the legislation that we push for. Just for example, the suppressor legalization bill from this past legislative session, it went through the House by a vote of 83 votes for and 16 against. So if you do the math on that, that's basically everybody, right? So as we all know from our civics class, when a bill goes through the House, it goes over to the Senate. And that's when we encounter problems. We had 20 of 26 Democrat senators in the Iowa Senate pledge support for this, but gun bills typically get assigned to the Senate Judiciary Committee, which is logical. Excuse me.
Right.
And they keep selecting a senator from Cedar Rapids named Robert Hogue from Senate District 19 to be chair of the Senate Judiciary Committee. Now, he has come out and said that as long as he is chairman of the Judiciary Committee, that no firearms bills will go through the Senate. Period. End of story. And in the last few years since he's been the chairman of the Judiciary Committee, he's kept his word. So we are having overwhelming support for our legislation in both sides of our legislature, only to get blocked by this one guy. Now, as you know...
That happens a lot, by the way.
So as you know, whoever the majority party is gets to select the chairs of the different committees. So unfortunately, even though IFC is a nonpartisan organization, and we do have great relationships with everybody, we are kind of painted into a corner on this, in that the Democrats seem unwilling to budge on making Robert Hogue chair. So in order for us to get rid of him as chair, we have to flip the Senate to Republican control. And they only have they have a 26 to 24 advantage. So it's a very slim minority that they have. So we only need one Republican seat to have a 50-50 split, and we need two to have a majority. So what we've done is we've actually decided to focus on 4 Senate races.
Come back.
Sure.
I need to take a short time out here.
Sure.
When we come back, I want you to tell who those are, okay? All right? There is a punchline to this conversation. We're going to get to it here in a moment, plus get other people involved. Your time is going to go by really fast. You can join us on News Radio 1040 WHO.
I got a guy.
Time is going to go real fast here, so gentlemen, finish the rest of the story. What's the punchline to the politics here in Iowa?
Right, so because we need to change who the majority is in the Senate in order to get rid of Robert Hogue as chairman of the Judiciary Committee, we have targeted 4 Senate races that are very close or seats that we need to retain. And actually 2 of them are open seats too. That would be Senate District 5, and we'd like to see Tim Crane-Brink, the Republican.
Where's that?
That is Pocahontas County, Humboldt, Calhoun, and Webster
Okay.
County, so that'd be northwest Iowa. Senate District 15 is the next one. That is the eastern half of Polk County and Jasper County, and we would like to see Crystal Brunts win that one. The other one is Senate District 39. This is more towards east. It is part of Johnston, Washington County, and all of Keokuk. Michael Moore is the guy to back there. And Senate District 41 is actually kind of an interesting one. Mark Shelgren is the incumbent there, but he won in an overwhelmingly Republican district. So we'd like to keep him in his spot currently, so we don't actually lose anything. We're also focusing some efforts on some House districts too, namely House District 12, which is straight west of here. That's Carroll, Audubon, and Crawford County. We'd like to see Brian Best beat the incumbent, Dan Mulbauer, there, because Dan Mulbauer has said some very offensive things regarding firearms rights in the past, and he is in favor of banning semi-automatic firearms and things like that, so we'd like to see him flipped.
Okay, all right. Did you have on the Iowa Firearms Coalition website, you have any of this
Yes,
stuff
sir.
up there? All right, so people, if they forget, they can do some research?
Yeah, absolutely.
Or if people disagree with you, can they come over to your house and hammer you on these and disagree with you on this?
We do have conversations on our Facebook, so
Okay.
people can join up and start
Or-
asking questions there.
Or
But
if any of those people you just mentioned from those jurisdictions disagree, they're welcome to call me anytime.
Yeah,
So this
sure.
is, all right.
and our website is iowafc.org.
Okay. Hey, thank you. We have lots of folks who want in on this conversation, and this is Dick. Good morning, Dick. Good morning, sir. Thank you for your patience. Good morning.
Well, thank you. Would you please address the UN arms treaty that was signed by Secretary of State John Kerry and the repercussions that may have on us gun owners in the U.S.?
Great
I'll
question.
hang up.
Thank you, Dick. All right. So John Kerry can say anything he wants, but does that obligate us to anything?
You know, that brings up a really important point, especially in Iowa right now. You've got a federal Senate seat that's, I would say, extremely important, not only for this issue, because any treaty that would need to happen would need to be ratified by the U.S. Senate.
Right.
So, Iowa, if this concerns you, I won't tell you who to vote for, but look for some leadership on the Second Amendment.
I'm going to borrow the attorney expertise from Ohio. Even if it got signed, can the Second Amendment, can the Constitution be amended through the treaty-making power? This is a make-or-break question for you. If you answer this one wrong, I can't even tell you where you're going to end up, buddy.
It can't be changed, but if you look at the fact that once, even without ratification, once it's signed and ratified by the UN and we agree to that, certain provisions of that are enforced.
Whether they're legal or not.
Whether they're legal or not, because the administration, they'll refer to the fact that there's a treaty in place, and they'll do certain things because there's a treaty in place. And so...
so the rest of us have to understand that that's a scam.
It's a scam, and it takes a lot, but once, that's why everybody fought so hard to make sure that we didn't jump on board with that. When we had Bolton as our UN ambassador, he was great on that issue. But all of a sudden, things changed, and that went through. So now, as essentially, we have the United Nations that will be able to pick and choose and have some effect on our Constitution.
Only because we're stupid, and we let them.
And we let them, and that's why, as Tim said, control of the Senate is important. As an attorney, it's our Supreme Court, because we're going to lose justices through attrition, through retirement. And that affects us the rest of our lives, and certainly the rest of my children's lives with the laws they're going to pass.
I'm thinking that we should, in the future, only select Supreme Court justices that have heart conditions.
That's, you know,
There is no reason for these people to live 80 and 90 years old. And we should make sure we only select people, even the ones we agree with, should be able to, if we don't have any way to limit their terms of office.
So that's your term limit provision.
Yeah,
That's
just
not-
only, they have to be diabetic.
High cholesterol count.
Yeah, we won't let them exercise. Deny them access to the to the gym, and make them go to all the rubber chicken banquets every night of the week. Anyway, gentlemen, thank you for joining us here today. I know we couldn't get to everybody's question, but we should do this on an ongoing basis, because you have demonstrated again how if we don't understand our rights, they can be abridged. And if we are ignorant of what belongs to us, we won't even know when it's missing. And the Second Amendment is always being nibbled at by constitutionally illiterate members of the political class who may be even well-intended, but they haven't read their contract. See you tomorrow, friends. Thanks for listening.
Farmers work hard.